even going on around the world. Literally in Australia, New Zealand, France, Canada, America, all around the world, they're asking for freedom.
Over 50,000 truckers marched from Vancouver to the Canadian capital of Ottawa to protest strict vaccine mandates aimed at their industry, slow rolling their rigs across the country in what they've called the Freedom Convoy. The movement quickly took the internet by storm, and in less than 2 weeks, they raised over $8 million and amassed over 405,000 followers on Instagram. Influential voices like Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, and Donald Trump have all come out in support of the truckers.
We want those great Canadian truckers to know that we are with them all the way.
It seems like it is a peaceful protest with a bit of a family atmosphere. And even though it's been bone-chilling cold, sometimes even going well below freezing for days at a time, well, the protesters there have been dancing, singing, chanting, honking their horns, handing out food and beverages, and they even set up bouncy castles for the kids to play in.
This so-called Freedom Convoy, it's mostly Americans. It's American truckers who don't want to get vaccinated and who are listening to right-wing hate radio on their podcast all day long, and they are like well marinated in the Trumposphere and the bizarre, all this bizarre stuff. And they say that they are fighting for freedom because Canada says you've got to, prove that you're vaccinated before we'll let you into the country. They're traveling through Canada and raising hell and going to Ottawa. They have descended on a soup kitchen, intimidating the staff and demanding to be fed, all without masks. Desecrated war memorials that pay tribute to those who fought for the very freedoms that the convoy supporters enjoy. They are defecating in public, including on the property of people whose home displayed a pride flag. They've overrun malls and stores all across Canada everywhere they go. They run around with no masks, proclaiming that no vaccine. And a lot of these stores have been forced to shut down. These fools are shutting down schools in the wake of these rallies, denying parents the freedom to go to work. And in Ottawa's downtown, they're running around making racist remarks and threats and generally causing people to feel unsafe. Spreading this meme of freedom means not being vaccinated. I am free from getting measles, thank God, or free from getting smallpox or polio. They are draining the resources of our healthcare system. This whole thing came out of a bunch of Facebook groups that were all started from the account of one mom in Missouri. And this one mom in Missouri lost control of her Facebook account in October of last year. It got hacked and hijacked. And since then, her daughter has created a new Facebook account for her that says, my old account got hacked. Well, her old hacked account, and we don't know who hacked this. We don't even know what country the people who hacked it are in. I mean, Facebook knows, and they could probably tell us all, but they're not saying. So here's this hacked Facebook group or Facebook page for an actual verified real-life American citizen, a Midwestern mom. And that one Facebook group created, this is all between just in 3 days, January 26, 27, and 28, they created a whole series of Facebook groups using mom's account, right? Convoy to Ottawa 2022 is one of the groups. Convoy to Freedom 2022, another group. Freedom Convoy Ottawa 2022 for Canada, another group. Freedom Convoy 2022 for another group. And 2022 official Freedom Convoy to Ottawa. All of these groups, a total of 340,000 members. Over 7,500 posts. Quite literally, I mean, January 26th, that was what, a couple of weeks ago? The Conservative Party leader last week was kicked out of the party. And, as a result, several Conservative Party members are breaking with the party. And for the Americans, it's totally irrelevant. They don't care who the leader of the Conservative Party Canada is. They just like the idea of a bunch of white truckers being in a national capital screwing stuff up. They are not all Canadians. And the ones who are unaffiliated with the union. The Canadian Trucking Union has come out against this protest.
It's disturbing when you see the protest turning into what looks like some kind of a fun carnival where they've got bouncy castles and hot tubs and saunas, a complete insult to the people who are putting up with this nonsense for the last 7 days, and it shows a great deal of insensitivity.
The police are also confiscating fuel from trucks. That way the truckers are totally blocked and locked down. People in support of the truckers raised $10 million on GoFundMe. However, GoFundMe was instructed by government leaders not to release that money, but to give it away to charity. And GoFundMe is now under investigation with multiple states' attorneys general for blocking the free flow of money.
We now have evidence from law enforcement that the previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation, with police reports of violence and other unlawful activity.
You will not comply with the institutions.
This remains, as it was from the beginning, an increasingly volatile and increasingly dangerous demonstration.
Want to stand up? We've got guns, we'll stand up and we'll bring them up.
The level of organization, funding, commitment, communication, we have found at least 2 operation centers right here in the city. There are multiple operation centers across the country and internationally. Funding is coming in locally, nationally, and internationally. Supports including legal advice, logistics support, and yes, fuel support are coming in from all sectors and all sides.
Canada, wake up. You're losing freedoms that you fought for so determinedly for years, for decades.
Hallowed be thy name.
Employee, and I was faced with the mandate to get the job, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. So I said no.
Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us.
Yeah, a revolution. If things don't change, there will be a revolution. I guarantee it.
Proper horns can be heard. Flags can be seen.
So as cars come by, they're horning. If they are in support of this movement, people are cheering.
Described the Convoy as a group of anti-vax truckers. In the face of these claims, organisers of the Freedom Convoy confirmed in a weekend press conference that they were fully vaccinated.
Want change? They feel that we are their last hope because nobody else is listening. We're listening, and we are here.
When I first came for the 29th to get here, I couldn't believe people were coming up to me and they were going, "Oh, thank you, thank you."
My family is in Central America over there waiting for this vaccine mandate to end. He gets to enjoy his family, while I am a born and raised Canadian and not enjoy my family while they're over there on the other side of the world.
Another after 2 years of lockdowns. We are not the same people we used to be, none of us. So to give one another a chance to see each other, to hear each other's stories, to hear who we become today and how we can work together to build a strong foundation for this nation.
Why haven't they built any new hospitals? In 2 years, a pandemic, why haven't they built a hospital? Yo, I got a message for Trudeau right here. Drop the mandates, drop the fucking passports, and get the hell out of my country.
Trudeau, he needs to go.
Trudeau is dead. He's dead. He's dead. He's dead. Trudeau is dead.
The Terry Fox statue. They put a flag on him and a sign that represented freedom. Terry Fox ran halfway across Canada with one leg carrying a flag. I'm pretty sure if he could be here, Terry Fox would be here.
The government shouldn't have the right to force people to make certain medical decisions.
They're in our capital because a whole 2 years into the pandemic, the Prime Minister has decided to put our supply chain at further risk with a punitive vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers. These are the same truckers that have been going above and beyond to keep our grocery and retail store shelves stocked over the past 2 years with no issue. At the start of the pandemic, politicians of all stripes, including the Prime Minister, encouraged Canadians to thank a trucker as some of the unsung heroes of the pandemic. Now, a whole 2 years into the pandemic, his vaccine vendetta will disrupt supply chains further and raise the cost of everyday goods more, impacting our economy and quality of life.
Fighting for freedom by exercising their right to protest against democratically elected leaders and then broadcasting their demands in the free and open press.
The entire purpose of this movement is to overthrow the government.
Any government official unwilling to comply with the demands within the MOU must resign.
Fuck! Like 10 people came out from the convoy and they're cheering me. Woo, you go! Like, I don't support you. I'm sorry.
This has gotten so much attention that Trump supported it at his last rally. Some of these mother truckers are only steps away from wearing hats that say, "Make Canada more like America great again," eh? Or for short.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing.
We're pulling these passports. We're going to get back to normal.
Everyone has to show their proof of vaccination or a negative test to get in. But once they do not sell any food or beverages, that causes COVID. You're allowed to wear your mask under your nose, but if you wear it under your chin, you get harassed and threatened to get kicked out. Everyone here is either vaccinated or has a negative test within the last 72 hours. But the shit still keeps happening.
Bring out swastikas and Confederate flags isn't just predictably shitty, it's also stupid. Canada hated the Nazis so much, we declared war on Germany 2 years before America did in World War II.
You gotta be fucking stupid to think that there ain't bad people on both sides, and you're trying to tell me that out of millions of people that there aren't fucking stupid people that are gonna join and align themselves, sometimes just to get media coverage and bullshit like that.
Are you aware that the truckers run a nightly garbage cleanup service on the Hill and are handing out free food at the shelters? Did you know that there have been no injuries reported until this morning? Did you know that this convoy has raised more money in support of its cause than all Canadian political parties combined so far in the first quarter of 2022.
Convoy in Canada is recruitment for the far right. It is literally being covered by the media heavily, which means more eyes are on them, which means that they can get their message out, which is recruiting people at this moment.
They were actually debating whether or not they were going to let a diabetic person through who might have died without getting their insulin.
But I am in no place to go tell these guys, oh, excuse me, can you turn your horn off? Can you get used to complying again? We want freedom. We're not asking for anything unreasonable, and we're doing it on your behalf.
Now they're protesting schools as well, and going into schools, causing them to go on lockdown. Let's compare the response to some of these different protesters by the police.
In some cases, patients needing life-saving treatment could only enter under police escort.
A crowd so loud, you could barely hear the loudspeakers. Close to 5,000 people rallied in front of Vancouver City Hall this afternoon, causing complete gridlock in the area around the Vancouver General Hospital.
Tell the truth, you liar!
Anger, conspiracy theories, and a distrust of science all on display Wednesday. For patients and their families, it was just more stress they didn't need.
Is that they're injecting something into our children.
Police in Salmon Arm have already had to intervene. Vaccine objectors tried to disrupt a school board meeting. Friday afternoon, the hysteria reached a whole new level. Claiming they were concerned about teenagers consenting to vaccines, several people entered schools in District 83. According to the RCMP, the group left before police could arrive, but several schools were put on what's known as hold and secure.
If any other race did this, everybody would be held accountable.
This video was posted on YouTube Saturday with a description saying RCMP were attacking and using pepper spray on peaceful protesters.
During an emergency debate in Parliament on Monday, Trudeau spoke out against the trucker protests, accusing them of trying to derail Canada's democracy, saying individuals are trying to blockade our economy, our democracy, and our fellow citizens' daily lives. It has to stop. The people of Ottawa don't deserve to be harassed in their own neighborhoods. He went on to say, Canadians trust science. A few people shouting and waving swastikas does not define who Canadians are.
We are begging you, this country, this province, this city, we're begging you to collectively come together to defend one residential neighborhood. It's about an extreme element that is roaming around the streets of our residential neighborhoods.
This week, as trucks blocked traffic on the Ambassador Bridge, which is the busiest border crossing to the United States, forcing people to close the bridge that links Detroit, Michigan, and the Canadian city of Windsor, Ontario. There's also another blockade that is formed at the Alberta-Montana border crossing, so they're starting to block these borders. There is a bit of traffic able to get through, but it is, for the most part, blocked, and police are calling these blockades unlawful. But interestingly, if you remember, Justin Trudeau threw his support behind the Singhu blockade in India after farmers protested against their government. And at the time, Trudeau said, quote, "Canada will always be there to defend the rights of peaceful protesters. We believe in the process of dialogue."
I happen to be wearing a mask at this protest. This woman starts yelling at me, "What are you doing with a mask?" I'm thinking, lady, this is a freedom rally. I haven't been here for 2.5 minutes and I'm already getting yelled at for making a choice that I personally wanted to make.
When Doug Ford shut down my side business, where the hell were you? You weren't there.
We are on day 8 of this occupation. Our city is under siege. This group is emboldened by the lack of enforcement by every level of government. They are terrorizing our residents, torturing them with incessant honking, threatening them and preventing them from leading their lives. People cannot go to work or open their businesses. They cannot sleep, walk, shop, go to medical appointments, or enjoy their neighborhood. This group is a threat to our democracy.
That about 100 children are living inside those trucks parked in front of Parliament.
Ottawa police admitted the number of children inside the rigs is hampering their response. Tonight, a family from Toronto toured the trucks and carried empty jerry cans marked Freedom. At a protest campsite, kids played in the snow not far from a stockpile of fuel containers. Estimate 25% of the 418 trucks parked on the streets have children living inside. But for many here railing against vaccination mandates, kids are the issue.
Childhood vaccination could be called child sacrifice.
But the media is literally the one that's helping your cause. The media is normalizing this shit.
There's too many out there that are bringing the news, but they're bringing an agenda. Are there any journalists left? Anybody who really wants to dig out the truth and put out the truth because that's what they live for, finding the truth.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Status Quo. Today we're going to be talking about a myriad of issues that has happened in 2022. We're going to go over that in a little bit. I've also realized that taking off my glasses is the worst possible thing for a teleprompter. So far, governments seem to be completely reactionary. From every crisis, whether it was from COVID to the Freedom Convoy, even the crisis in Ukraine, everyone's just reacting. No one seems to be thinking. Now, right now I want to talk about COVID in Canada. Governments and businesses seem to have conspired to work together to edge out the lower and middle classes. Evidence is seeing tons of middle class businesses going under during the pandemic and only certain people allowed to get served when it wasn't a universal income. Lower and middle class people were being crushed throughout the entire pandemic. Meanwhile, corporations were receiving record profits. It just feels wrong in your heart. It feels wrong. CERB money. I remember that we actually had to apply for CERB because we lost our job. When COVID hit, it devastated the economy and it pretty much made us lose our jobs and we had to go onto CERB. And CERB was really helpful. It was one of the things during the pandemic that helped me go from a fast food job that I was stuck in to giving me the time and ability to actually look for work that worked for me, and I was able to find that job. So it was really helpful. What really sucked was at the very end, they then turned around and were like, oh, we accidentally overpaid you, so we're gonna need some of that money back. And that's just really terrible. There were so many people that couldn't pay that back. And that was unreasonable for them to do. The fact that it wasn't universal across the board basically made it so some people got assistance and other people didn't. And a lot of people had to pay out of pocket just to survive. Why didn't any of those people get benefits? Why didn't smaller businesses that were struggling, that updated all of their systems and their processes for COVID, not then support it? It's hard not to feel like it's a conspiracy when there's so many ways you could have done it better. It was interesting, before we even lost our job, we got really sick, not knowing what that illness was, but was sick for a month. Fast forward almost 2 years later, double vaccinated. We get sick again. We are told by someone in our house, oh, I got COVID. No, 100%. So you probably have COVID too. In that moment, I realized this is the second time I've gotten it. It feels exactly like the first time in February 2020. Before any mandates, before anyone got off the couch or even knew it was a thing, I swear it was spreading and getting everybody. Anyone in the service industry, anyone that was dealing with the public got sick. So all of this seems to be after the fact. All of this seems to be reactionary, I guess. And just doesn't seem right, does it? But I don't know, what do you think? One thing's for sure though, I'm not sure if it was because we got sick with COVID twice or we got the vaccine, but the second time was definitely less painful. I didn't feel like I was on death's door for most of it.
Okay, listen to this one. So the company I work for has 30 drivers, okay? 10 of them are sick right now. And I was wondering why all these trucks were in our lot. I'm like, God, there's like 12 trucks here. Usually there's only 2 that are left over, right? Because they're spares. But there's 10 of them out of 30 that are sick with COVID, and our local guy just called in too, and he's sick. And this is like a couple years now that these drivers have already gotten their fucking shots long ago. And some of them have boosters. It's like we don't even, it's like the people in the Arctic. They were getting sick, all of them were sick with COVID, remember that? The Antarctic, they were doing research up there and they all got fucking sick. That's the same with us. We don't socialize with anybody. I mean, these guys that are vaxxed believe in, like, some of them believe in this vaccine. They believe in the science.
So I guess the big question is, what has the government done? No, really, what has it done? Because, you know, it's not like they're in a vacuum. They don't know that these things are going to happen. You know, what was the whole purpose of the mandates? Well, the whole purpose of the mandates was to lessen the burden on the healthcare system. But what have they done to fix that burden? What has the government done to prepare for the next pandemic? And what did they do during all this time that we were social distancing indoors and you know, doing our part? What was their part? And in the end, what have they done to increase capacity? How many new hospitals have they made? How many more doctors are they training? I haven't heard anything. It starts to really stack up in the conspiracy aisle. So in this atmosphere of COVID, the Freedom Convoy didn't come out of nowhere. It is a reaction to all the things that I have brought up to this point. The fact that there has been no communication, it's just been sort of taking orders and listening to the science, but the science is always constantly changing and the goalposts constantly changing. So at what point do we actually have a conversation with the people and what we want to do instead of what the government thinks we should do? So there was a lot of pros and cons with the Freedom Convoy. One of the pros was the renowned focus on the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. A lot of people were unaware of the Charter, and one of the most encouraging things that came out of the Freedom Convoy was people were educating each other and even handing out copies of it at one point. Cops actually respected the right to protest and in many respects did their jobs. There was some areas where they did not do their jobs. It revealed how poor our education has gotten and the fact that people were just figuring this out now and they hadn't figured this out beforehand was really telling. So the cons. Unfortunately, with the first little bit of the protest with the honking, dubbed the honkening, was an event that I think put the protest on the wrong side of people's opinions right away. So there was many downsides to the convoy. One thing is for sure that the honking that went on for several days brought a lot of negative attention, but necessary attention to the protest because, let's face it, most protests just go unnoticed.
So I'm standing outside the counter-protest organized by healthcare workers in response to the Freedom Convoy protesters who've essentially made healthcare workers feel threatened and essentially unappreciated in the city of Toronto. And only a couple hundred people came here and showed up to support healthcare workers. Meanwhile, just across the street here at Queen's Park, thousands of people have shown up to protest masks, mandates for vaccines, and essentially all the things that actually allow healthcare workers to do their job and keep people safe. They're asking people to leave in groups. They've been hassled along the way. They're feeling unsafe, so they've had to organize a short protest just to support themselves. How did we come to this moment where 2 years ago we were banging on pots and pans to support healthcare workers, and now they actually are getting memos from the Toronto Police to not wear medical garb on their way into work. This is the real Freedom Convoy. These are the people who are keeping you safe. They're protecting and saving the lives of people who are knowingly choosing not to get vaccinated, and then they're risking their own lives to take care of them. The City of Toronto, many police services, people in this country, by not speaking up, by not standing up for the real heroes of this country, have created a climate where essentially these wild, vocal, fringe, selfish minority can stand thousands of people in Queen's Park unabated, while the real heroes of this city get a small protest in their defense. It's appalling, it's shameful, and it's actually a real indictment of how we've let this situation progress. You really want to appreciate freedom, show your support for healthcare workers, show your support for doing the right thing, tell people to get vaccinated, and stop allowing a small minority of people to push an agenda which we all know is wrong. From the bottom of my heart and all the people in this country and this city, the people who really understand, thank you to our healthcare workers for doing what you do.
This whole Freedom Convoy thing is giving fresh depth to the term punky.
So it was necessary to get everyone's attention. It's just unfortunate that it seems that white supremacists and other negative actors latched onto the movement to attract negative attention to the whole conversation and soured anyone that had any legitimate discourse.
So nice to see so many faces. I have a question for you, okay? I need you to help me out. I'm looking for someone. I need to know what a white supremacist looks like. Are you a white supremacist, sir?
Yes, I am a white supremacist.
All right. There you go.
For those of you who aren't aware, back in December of 2021, the Canada Unity Project submitted an MOU to the government. They've since been gaining signatures up to 300,000, like not tiny, less than 1% of Canada, so pretty tiny, but 300,000 signatures on it. This was the foundation for the entire trucker convoy. This is, whether you know it or not, what you were fighting for. It's the only formally presented document backing what this entire project is about. The main issue people had with it is the fact that it said they wanted to dismantle the government. It clearly exposed that this wasn't about vaccines, wasn't about mandates, wasn't about anything other than getting rid of Trudeau because they have a personal issue with Trudeau. Which, great, good for you. I also didn't vote for him, but I'm not trying to overthrow democracy.
That's right, Al. I've seen the mosque up in Fort Mac. Ladies and gentlemen, we are being overrun. The Anglo-Saxon people of Canada are our God-given culture. The Anglo-Saxon and the Francophones. We are losing our culture to other ethnic religions. This is not racism. This is genocide of a culture.
Enough is enough. Go home and stay home. I have attended protests and rallies in the past when I agreed with the goals, when I supported the people expressing their concerns and their issues. Black Lives Matter is an excellent example of that. But I have also chosen to not go anywhere near protests that have expressed hateful rhetoric, violence towards fellow citizens, and a disrespect not just of science, but of the frontline health workers and 90% of truckers who have been doing the right thing to keep Canadians safe.
Basically, he told them in the most polite way that they are stupid and that's why he's not going to talk to them. And in the comments of his response, they literally go out and they insult him. Like, oh, he's such a wimp, such a pussy for not wanting to talk to us. Like, last time I checked, you guys wish violence upon this guy all the time. And from what I've heard from people in Ottawa, you guys are attacking people for wearing masks on the streets.
You know what sucks? Later's not communicating with you. Another one of the things that was really negative about this convoy was the fact that people just discredited the convoy and didn't even actually address any of the issues that were being brought up.
But see, they don't recognize him as the leader. They said they don't want to meet with Justin Trudeau. They said they want to talk to the Governor General, that they want to form a coalition government with the opposition parties, even though they're unelected.
You're interpreting and you're reading into things in the media there. Hang tight. Sorry, I got to correct you. They want to speak to Justin Trudeau. But unfortunately, Justin Trudeau doesn't even want to leave his high horse and speak to them.
Why would he speak to people who are spewing misinformation, conspiracy theories, aborted fetuses in vaccines who are making unreasonable demands?
Once again, as the media, you are now misleading the public. Have you gone out there and spoken to them? They are the nicest people.
I don't doubt that they are nice people, but they are grossly misinformed. And I'm happy that you tune in to us for a few minutes a day just to get a little bit of misinformation so you can give us some of yours.
Yeah. There was a lot of energy here, like so many people. And I got home, and I got home, you almost cry. Like it's good emotion, but it's a lot of emotion.
It is good emotion.
And you hear a lot of stories.
We are healing together.
I think the people of Ottawa are getting mad.
Through this pandemic, Canadians have seen and have a right to expect responsible leadership. And unfortunately, that's not what we've always seen.
Prime Minister, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, friends. As you know, the theme of this annual meeting is Mastering the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I couldn't imagine anybody who could represent more the world which will come out of this fourth industrial revolution. It will be a young world. It will be a digital world. Now, who could represent such a world better than you, Prime Minister? We are very glad that at the beginning of this meeting, you are talking to us, to represent also a new, open Canada. I want to use this opportunity also to thank our Canadian constituency, which always has been a very loyal and very much engaged constituency here at the Forum. But now, I think with you, together with our constituents, Prime Minister, we can make sure that in the future, we strengthen the cooperation even more with your country. Prime Minister, we are very much looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you, Professor Schwab, for your warm welcome and for bringing this impressive group together. Today, we are gathered here to contemplate whether we are in the stages of the fourth industrial revolution about to begin. What a breathtaking possibility that is. The one thing certain about the next industrial revolution is, like the three that preceded it, it will bring enormous change. If you are looking for a country that has the diversity, the resilience, the positivity, and mostly the confidence that will not just manage this change, but take advantage of it, there has never been a better time to look to Canada.
I think the truckers closing the borders, we are falling into their trap, and I think
We should be utilizing this manpower where it actually hurts.
Without Canada, there is no injection. They get paid from both cookie jars. That was illegal in the turn of the last century here in the United States, and it is illegal anywhere where you have a monopoly control of a global market.
Does an entity exist that can arrest Justin Trudeau and hold him criminally liable for these actions?
Courts are meeting on both sides of the border to enforce his commands as well as provincial commands to try to rein in these people who are peacefully protesting. The problem with both of those things is the courts are being now railroaded into the participation in the criminal conspiracy. This is felony violations of the law. This is domestic coercion, which is a felony, and any law enforcement, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, any administrative court anywhere in Canada can arrest him. He is actually committing crimes.
By now, many of you have seen the disgusting behavior being done by those in Ottawa with the drumming and the pipe and the so-called sacred fire. And I can feel your pain because it's in my chest too.
How are you, gentlemen? I'm not going to go through it, just recording, so.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We're used to be recording.
I know.
RCMP has got to be stopped.
Excuse me, did you see that incorrect?
What's going on? We're hearing mixed reports. Is it fuel pickup?
Fuel being seen, yes.
Okay, thank you. It helps to know what's going on because I'm hearing, arrests, everybody being, and that's why I was wondering.
No one's being blasted out here with tear gas.
At the same time, we have a protest of truckers organized by an open white supremacist, funded by the same idiots that did the January 6th insurrection in the United States. They are blockading a border with another sovereign nation, and our government and our RCMP do nothing.
You all about right now.
If they're not on the road, if they're on the dirt, it's okay then?
No, all these vehicles are actually getting removed.
What's the legal basis when you remove vehicles that are not blocking any traffic on the road and are actually not on the road?
We are in the injunction area. The injunction is granted to allow Teal Cedar to do.
Why do we have such a vast difference in these two reactions?
The other guy.
Thank you very much.
We assault people who are not breaking the law and who are trying to protect the law and the environment. We have another group outrightly breaking the law and threatening our safety, and the RCMP urge caution. It makes no sense.
As you stand there waving your flag, yelling freedom, I've started to notice how our world is using the word freedom so loosely. Don't tell me you're fighting for me. Where were you when we walked for Wet'suwet'en, when we walked for MMIWC, when we walked for Black Lives Matter, when we protested to stop Asian hate, when we walked for climate change, when we walked for Every Child Matters?
And it just really sucks that one of the things that hurt the most was it wasn't that this convoy was not getting the crackdown. I want people to have the right to protest. What really sucks is there's a lot of other protests that don't get those same rights, that get militarized police. And when you see the stark difference between the police reaction to this convoy and other protests, you start to think that maybe, just maybe, we can change a little bit of our enforcement methods when it comes to pipelines or old growth forests. One more final note on the convoy, the gas and the fumes were another complaint people were talking about. Engines and generators constantly running in a city is just not really healthy, especially for children as well. There was a lot of children at this event, and the event was highly criticized as, at one point, using them as human shields on the bridge, that big old bridge, the bridge that caused all the shit.
Justin Trudeau is probably the most divisive prime minister we've had in our history. He will do whatever it takes to pit people against each other so that he can maintain power. I don't like that this man is leading our country down this path of just continued division. Because of this, with the help of social media, we are in a cold civil war. Your algorithm is probably showing you things different from my algorithm. And we continue to live in those disparate realities. and we choose not to see beyond our parameters. And I'm here to say, as someone who's just a voice on a podcast, love your neighbor as you'd like to love yourself. Give each other the benefit of the doubt. Don't allow the media, don't allow government to dictate how you should treat people. It's broken my heart throughout this pandemic. There's been broken marriages, broken relationships, broken friendships over politics. Were your friendships really worth what a man on a television is telling you?
Even though the event was portrayed as safe for children with the use of bouncy castles and a festival-like environment, there were negative factors that compromised the safety for families. The fact that there was at least 200 big rig engines constantly generating diesel fumes into the environment where people and children were huffing that shit. There were a lot of children at this event. And not to say that they shouldn't be at this event, but one has to wonder about the environmental effects, as well as these big rig horns blast at about 120 decibels, which is the pain threshold and can cause actual damaged hearing.
Two things. It's not just annoying, it's actually like a safety issue for people. Like, besides the fact that continuous noise like this is considered like psychological torture and warfare, like, we're literally being told not to go to school because it's not safe for us. I might not be able to take the subway because I have to shut down the subway because it's not safe when the protesters overrun it. My friends are terrified to go to school because there's anti-LGBTQ groups roaming about. Nurses are being told not to wear their scrubs because it's unsafe for them to walk out in their scrubs in fear that they will be hurt. Like, it's not just annoying, like, people are in danger right now. But besides that, do you really think that Justin Trudeau is the sole person to blame for border mandates? You need to be vaccinated to get into Canada. You need to be vaccinated to get into America. What would dropping the Canadian mandates do? Because how would the truckers get back? Truckers have always had like a lot of regulations on their jobs in general. Like, this isn't necessarily, like, it is a new thing that you need to be vaccinated as a trucker, but will you shut up? It isn't a new thing that truckers have to have like all these medical evaluations. They have to have rest stops. They have to be checked out constantly because there's a lot of medical things you need to be checked out for to be a trucker. So I don't know why this is what they decided to get all upset about. Border control, and when people go from one border to the other and go from one country to the other by road, is a very complex process that has a lot of mandates on it from both countries. This isn't just a Justin Trudeau fucked us up problem. Like, I don't think people understand how little the Prime Minister actually has power. Laws are passed through the Senate, guys. That is, it's not just Justin Trudeau sitting in his office going, truckers aren't allowed to do anything anymore.
25% of the 418 trucks in Campton, our city, have children living in them. Children who could be at risk during a police operation. We're working with the Children's Aid Society to ensure their welfare and safety.
This was difficult for the people in the area, people living in the area, pets living in the area, and it went on for a couple of weeks. Once the honking ended, the protest itself got more bearable for everyone involved. And I feel that the negative aspects that were talked about before start to melt away because it doesn't feel like an attack anymore. It starts to feel like a protest. Maybe next time do it for a little bit to get everyone's attention and then do the protest. Maybe that's how we announce protests. Maybe that would be a good way to announce it. But then to sustain it, that's where I think it crosses the line for people. So moving forward, honk for a day. We'll hear you. That's my advice. At the end of the day, Canadians do not have the right to protest if it disrupts the economy, period. At the end of the day, we're all getting screwed in a class war. You should have the ability to speak your mind even if it disrupts the economy. The economy isn't the end-all, be-all of society. It's us. So they should be listening to us as well, just not one side of it.
Truckers can't support businesses because they're not wearing their masks and they don't have vaccines. Countless videos all over the internet will showcase that people are throwing temper tantrums in Tim Hortons and other spots because they can't get what they want. Why? Because they're not wearing a mask. Not to mention the fact that there were two shelters in Ottawa that were physically and verbally assaulted simply on the fact that they wanted food. And also a women's shelter. They aren't feeding the homeless. The videos that you're seeing all over TikTok that showcase these truckers feeding the homeless are actually just feeding themselves. The food that you see that's coming in all those little food camps are actually for the convoy itself. And I know this because I have friends that live in Ottawa and they say the same thing. If that was true about the lowered crime to almost zero, then why was the GoFundMe frozen? Why is it that the city of Ottawa is issuing a Class Act lawsuit against the Convoy? Why is it that there are 40% businesses in Ottawa that have had to close due to this convoy? Why is it that the mall in Ottawa, Rideau Hall, closed down for the past 13 days, causing, $40 million in revenue damage because they couldn't work? Let's talk about the SA cases that are coming forward from multiple sources and women sharing their stories about getting assaulted. Or let's talk about the residents in Ottawa choosing to wear a mask, minding their own business, and being assaulted and verbally assaulted by protesters telling them to take off their mask and they're just a puppet. Or let's talk about the fact that there are people who are choosing their freedoms, as what this convoy is apparently fighting for, to choose to stand up against it and speaking their mind, and they are being intimidated by people. Or let's talk about the fact that the first week they were in Ottawa, they decided to blast their horns literally all hours of the day, causing significant psychological harm to people who live in Ottawa. And like most intelligent people would understand is that sound torture like that is actually very, very damaging to not only just normal people, children, animals, things like that. Let's also not forget to mention there were 3 reports, one confirmed, of one individual dying in an ambulance simply on the fact that the truckers would not move. Let's also highlight the fact that a woman decided to go into the truckers convoy chat and beg them to move out of the way because her brother was diabetic and was having an episode. And the response that she got was literally, well, if he dies, he dies.
Like 90% of truckers are vaxxed. 90% of teachers, doctors, nurses, 90% of Canadians are vaxxed. And we just want the other 10% to take this free, safe, and effective vaccine so that the 10% don't take up 50% of the hospital beds that the 90% of us have to use.
Did you hear about the GoFundMe? They cut it off. And now they're refunding everybody the money that they donated. That didn't happen. No, look, it's right here on the GoFundMe page. They said it violated the guidelines, so they're refunding people their money. No, they aren't. Okay, well, did you hear that they were telling doctors and nurses not to wear their scrubs on the streets because of harassment? No, they didn't. Yeah, there's been real-life accounts of people who have been harassed. There's even been people who have been threatened with schmexual assault for wearing masks. Like, it's insane. Those are actors. What? Okay, but did you see the live where that lady was burning the flag and there was like all this like, don't burn the flag because the media's gonna think we're crazy? That was photoshopped. Photoshopped? Like I saw it with my own eyes. It was on multiple people's lives. Like it happened in real time. Antifa. What are you talking about? Mainstream media. It's all over TikTok and Facebook and every social media. Freedom!
What is your end goal when you say Trudeau must go? I have asked this question multiple times and nobody will answer it. I'm not really sure if a lot of people realize that if Trudeau steps down, the Liberal Party is still in power. Is that what you want? My concern when I hear that is that you want to completely undo the legal democratic election we just had to put your person in power. And if you're fighting for freedom, that's not it.
If you do this behavior again, you will get your way. Now we as Albertans will have the knowledge that anytime we disagree with any of Alberta's government's choices, including their effects on greenhouse gases and global warming, we can just get friends together, park trucks, and refuse to move. Cops won't do anything, Canbay won't do anything, and they'll just change laws to suit our needs.
This truck convoy has got more media attention and support from people than the Black Lives Matter march, Indigenous marches, and the March for Women these past 2 years combined.
Don't you know that vaccines cause autism? There's an entire scientific study on it. You mean the one by Andrew Wakefield from 1998? Yeah, that's the one. The study that cost him his medical license, and the article was so retracted that they wrote retracted in big red letters on every page? Yep, media censorship is horrible. The same study where on the very last page they literally admit they found no connection between vaccines and autism? No? Alright, then let's look at other credible scientific sources that show a connection and... Oh wait, there are none.
A year ago, the Prime Minister rejected vaccine mandates, calling them extreme measures that could have real divisive impacts on our community and country. Since then, no one has created more division than the Prime Minister, pitting Canadian against Canadian and using vaccine status as a dangerous political weapon.
The leader of the Conservative Party and her team have been their biggest biggest champions, even promoting their fundraising.
Somebody needs to tell the minister that it's 2022. The redundant PCR testing and asymptomatic fully vaccinated travelers doesn't make any sense. Permanent travel restrictions are not the answer because the current ones are ineffective. The government's duplicative arrival testing regime is out of step with the world. It takes up to a week for those results. That means forced quarantines, high costs for families.
We all condemn hateful and destructive acts by a few at any protest. Whether it's beheading the statue of Queen Victoria in Manitoba, tearing down the statue of Sir John A. in Montreal, or putting flags on Terry Fox, whether it's burning churches, whether it's wearing blackface, whether it's Hezbollah flags or Nazi flags, we all condemn it.
Countless truckers are stuck across the border because of anti-vaccine mandate protests happening at the bridges in Windsor and Sarnia. Traffic is backed up for kilometers. Truckers are running out of food, water, they have no access to the washroom. Many truckers are even running out of medication.
I want to be very clear. We are not intimidated by those who hurl insults and abuse at small business workers and steal food from the homeless.
This government is working very closely with the City of Ottawa to provide the police all of the tools and the resources that they need to end this convoy as quickly and as peacefully as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Foothills.
Canadians, including a senior member of the Liberal caucus, are speaking loud and clear.
If you joined the protests because you're tired of COVID, you now need to understand you are breaking laws. The consequences are becoming more and more severe. You don't want to end up losing your license, end up with a criminal record, which will impact your job.
Now, these blockaders are taking away the freedom of other people to move their goods and themselves where they want to go, and that is wrong. And the government has laws and tools in place to combat it right now.
No, I'm going to actually have to agree with you here, Pierre. Really, I'm happy you changed your tune after you went to Ottawa and seen all the carnage. And what was that? That's from 2020. What was that? He's talking about Indigenous blockades. What the fuck?
One person is responsible for this mess, and that's the Prime Minister. The rest of the world is moving on. Other countries all around the world are lifting restrictions. Provinces across the country are doing exactly the same, but we've got this holdup. Saskatchewan, Alberta, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec are beginning to lift these restrictions. At midnight in Alberta, the vaccine passport came to an end. Freedom is on the march in this country.
Stigmatize, divide, and wedge. This is what the Prime Minister did. Why?
These blockades cannot continue. So make no mistake, the border cannot and will not remain closed.
The grounds in front of the House of Commons were put there specifically for protesters. And as someone who has participated in many, many protests in my life, I want to ensure that people have the ability to, yes, disrupt government when they need to raise issues and awareness about what needs to be done and what the government should be doing. Do I think it should be a place where we allow extremist attitudes to not just disrupt, but to hold siege our entire capital? Absolutely not.
But this is what they didn't tell you.
Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas.
I was here the first day of Ground Zero. I actually spoke on stage. I actually saw the guy with a swastika flag.
So it was a real thing.
It was a real thing. But this is what they didn't tell you. He was going around with the flag saying, is this what you want for our country?
Really?
This is what Trudeau is going to turn our flag into if we allow this draconian fascism to continue. Is this what you want the Maple Leaf to be replaced by? This is what we're heading to, people. And he was speaking with a European accent. So I'm thinking that he came from a country that knows about fascism.
Yeas for 151.
151.
Yeas for 185.
So there's police moving in, handing out more leaflets, another warning.
Trudeau has done the impossible. He has turned a fringe anti-vax movement in Canada into a global campaign. Freedom convoys are popping up all over the world now, in Israel, in Belgium, America, France, Australia. There are two takeaways from this movement. Number one, it exposes the West's unscientific and arrogant temperament. And number two, it exposes the hypocrisy of Western leaders. Let me show you two sets of pictures. One is from Paris, the other is from the US. There was tear gas,
There was intimidation. There were clashes. Do you know what was missing? The lectures on morality. Imagine if these pictures were from Baghdad or Cairo or New Delhi. Trudeau would have been rallying on Twitter. Joe Biden would have been lecturing from the White House. But in this case, they are in full agreement. The protests must end. If Canada's blockades are illegal, so are India's. If Canada can use the police to restore daily life, so can India. That is what the West must realize and accept.
Comment section. Like all these white people in the comment section had never seen police brutality before. Or was it, they hadn't seen it happen to white people before, right? I just find it funny. Like, black and brown people have been telling you this for decades. Maybe if you would have been listening to them the entire time, maybe that wouldn't have been happening this past weekend. Just a thought.
We've learned from previous protests and demonstrations. We're monitoring the coverage. One of the tactics that the protesters and demonstrators are using is misinformation. Information that is inaccurate, information that misleads the public. We're actively tweeting and providing information out through social media and other media mechanisms.
The next step on the New World Order agenda is being normalized by Trudeau's unprecedented power grab.
Canadians expect debate. Debate in service of all Canadians. Debate that is grounded in a shared acceptance of the facts. The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations. I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited.
Now, some of those tools, we will be putting forward measures to put those tools permanently in place.
The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate.
The Prime Minister and the Emergency Preparedness Minister have repeatedly stated that foreign extremist financing is behind Canadian protests. At Public Safety Committee last week, Deputy Director of Intelligence for FinTrack, Barry McKillop, stated that there is no evidence to back up these claims. In fact, he stated, quote, there has not been a spike in suspicious transactions related to the protest, end quote.
Very soon, the graduates of tyranny will follow suit, creating an environment ripe for false flag order out of chaos.
If you are involved in this protest, we will actively look to identify you and follow up with financial sanctions and criminal charges. Absolutely. This investigation will go on for months to come.
Yesterday, during a press conference, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Some people will say we moved too quickly. Other people will say, no, we should have acted weeks ago. The reality is this: the Emergencies Act is not something to take lightly. It is not the first thing you turn to, nor the second, nor the third. So my question is, Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister please tell Canadians what first, second, and third actions he took before invoking the Emergency Act?"
All of our heroes and great Canadians in Ottawa, please do not worry. Even if today was your last day on the line, it was not for nothing. We have all seen how you have been treated, and we will never forget. The whole world has been watching, and the honking will continue until freedom improves.
I can't imagine that anyone who votes no tonight is doing anything other than indicating that they don't trust the government.
Trudeau has invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time ever. And now you can too.
Mr. Jones, this is the CRA. It seems you haven't filed your taxes for the last 2 years.
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
What?
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
Sir, you can't do that.
Just watch me. Thanks, Justin Trudeau.
Overwhelmed, stressed, incapable of handling a situation? Invoke the Emergencies Act.
I'm sorry, Gary, you just haven't landed any new accounts, so I'm gonna have to let you go.
I invoke the Emergencies Act. Sorry!
These special temporary measures help you cope with any urgent and critical situation long after you should have.
Gary, I'm leaving you.
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
I've met somebody new.
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
Damn you, Gary. We have to face this.
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
The Emergencies Act. It's for emergencies. If you fail to act, Emergency Act.
I invoke the Emergencies Act.
Not available in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
Train the people only to consume. Step 2. Infiltrate adults with the news. Step 3. Indoctrinate the children through the schools and the music and the apps on the phones that they use. Step 4. Separate the right from the left. Step 5. Separate the white from the black. Step 6. Separate the rich from the poor. Use religion and equality to separate them more. Step 7. Fabricate a problem, made a lie. Step 8. Put it on the news every night. Step 9. When people start to fight and divide, take control. This is called situational design.
We had martial law imposed. It's supposed to be debated in Parliament, and then we have to talk about the fact that there's been no Parliament for 2 years. On the very day that the debate is supposed to start, the government announces that it's going to suspend Parliament yet again, not because of COVID, but because of the dangers of the situation they created to stop debate about that very measure, and everyone went along with it.
There were a lot of those men and women that came for 2 or 3 whole weeks. They were showing a good spirit, and they had their parties. But you know this was hard. They had to spend the money. They got their money seized by the government. They're out there being mocked by the majority of the Canadian press. They don't want to be 3 months in January and February squatting in a truck in front of a Parliament building in the middle of a media storm.
The story of this pandemic is not one of division. It's one of solidarity. It's a story of frontline healthcare workers showing up day after day in impossible situations. It is a story of grocery workers and farmers and truckers keeping us fed, of teachers doing their best to connect with children through screens. Our story is one of neighbors helping each other get vaccinated, helping each other when they're in need. We will not let the last few weeks define this pandemic for us. Canadians have sacrificed too much, lost too many loved ones, missed out on too many moments to allow our country to become divided by hate and violence. Don't let your anger turn into hatred. We know that hatred is like a fire. When it's allowed to grow, it will consume everything.
Like, I can't believe pepper spraying moms and stomping over grandmas and walkers with a horse, and cops are on the internet patting each other on the back. They're
laughing about it too.
Yeah. They're proud of it, and it's terrible. Yeah. Like, this isn't the Canada that I want my kids to grow up in, or that I want to live in. That, like, it's so wrong. Like,
a crisis reveals who you are, and it reveals your values. The handling of the truckers' demonstration has unmasked the blackface-loving Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Trudeau, by bringing emergency powers and having the police rounding them all up like it's some, fascist state. This is what I'm talking about. This is a form of fascism going on. And yet he would profess to be the most liberal guy you'd ever meet in your life. And yet he's behaving like a fascist.
The federal government has not met the threshold necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act. This law creates a high and clear standard for a good reason. The act allows government to bypass ordinary democratic processes. This standard has not been met. The Emergencies Act can only be invoked when a situation seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, that's a big one, security and territorial integrity of Canada as a country, and when the situation cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. Emergency legislation should not be normalized. It threatens our democracy and our civil liberties.
The Emergency Act was definitely not the right thing to use in this instance. There wasn't the level of violence or threat imposed by these protesters to justify it. And the consequences of using the act for something so minor and so small has long-term implications for our society. When you use racism to discredit a whole group, it mirrors tyrannical dictators in other parts of the world. And it proves that we are no different than those that live under tyranny if we continue these policies unjustifiably.
Well, this truckers' convoy protest was quite a mixed bag for Justin Trudeau. When we tested on the different elements and the implementation of the Emergency Act, that about 2/3 of Canadians were okay with freezing bank accounts, and they were good with the Liberals introducing the Emergency Act. But when we asked Canadians, their impression of Justin Trudeau had improved or worsened as a result of his handling of the truckers' convoy protest. 47% of Canadians said that it had worsened, and only 20% said that it had improved. So it's like a net negative by more than 2 to 1.
So now at this point in the video, I would like to open up the floor to my best friends and colleagues. Both of these people have differing point of views in the political spectrum, but we are all friends and we can duke it out and have a great conversation and see what can come from that.
I don't want people to know what side I'm on. I want people just to think, and I want to stimulate a dialogue, because I'm so tired of labels and, oh, this person is this and that person is that. It's like, no, it's not. No, we all need to be our own person, and we all need to, through dialogue, share our ideas, and then let people make up their own mind.
So welcome you two. This is the force behind the status quo, so now you see who's bringing this all to you. How have you guys felt living in a society that's slowly just been like piece by piece falling apart? And for me, it's been really anxiety inducing.
Yeah. I think it stems from a normalcy that we were born into in the 90s. We were pretty much, we almost inherited a country that seemingly looked like it was together, but then we kind of let that fall apart. We took it for granted. We didn't notice small things that built up over time that eventually caused all of this to happen. Like, this didn't happen overnight. We've been slowly eroding for years now. One would even argue since 9/11. Mm-hmm. And now, since the pandemic, and we've reached a breaking point as a country, and so many people are upset. And now finally some people stood up and had enough, and obviously there's going to be bad actors and reactionaries that are going to capitalize on any movement, even going back to the riots in Vancouver when the Canucks lost. Anyone will find an excuse to instigate and discredit, but one thing can be certain is everyone's talking now. If anything, Justin Trudeau has actually brought most of Canada together against him, and now we're having these discussions. So I mean, I can't wait for the next election, because maybe people are actually going to participate in their democracy, and I think that's another reason how we got here is a lack of participation. Oh, it's hopeless. Oh, why do I even care?
Yeah, majority of people just in the world in general don't vote even if they can.
Yeah.
I've noticed that.
And it's hard to make those realizations because there's too many divides among us. So we all think, oh, well, these people are left, well, these people are right, or oh, these people are gay, or the straight people won't understand these people. There's so many different divides, even French versus English.
Yeah.
And even at a federal level, French versus English. I even have a hard time understanding what's going on with the government, and the translations aren't that great. And it's just even hard to stay on track with even what our own government is doing. There's so really at our nation's core, there are so many divides, yet under law, we're all supposed to be equal with this charter. And it's stimulating that conversation of, well, are we that equal? And then we have a government telling us, well, no, we're not, because you have unacceptable views. And then that just causes this rift amongst the populace. But I don't think the majority are buying this anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think less division and standing up to our government, no matter if it's far left or far right, that's going to be the answer. And that's how we all take our country back. And that has a different context or meaning for different people. But the one commonality, I think, is that we're all free. And that's why I think this Freedom Convoy has garnered so much attention from all walks of life.
Yeah,
they can frame it any way they want, but at the end of the day, it's literally your freedom at stake here. And we took it for granted because we were born into it.
Right.
And I think now that we've had this challenge to it, well, we can either just keep on going the way we were going, or we can do something about it. And the only way we can really do something about it is through dialogue.
Yeah,
and that's why we're doing this.
And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring you guys together, to like begin that conversation with us, but as well as our audience at home. We want you guys to be mentioning in the comments below, like, what do you think about all these subjects, and to be a part of this conversation just as much as we're talking here. Because that's what's been lost, that dialogue, that communication. In any relationship, you need good communication. And I don't remember the last time when the government asked me how I was doing or what I actually even wanted to do. I don't think they've really even took a sample.
Well, the government is supposed to be accountable, but if nobody holds them to account, what do you think they're going to do?
Whatever they want.
And here we are.
Yeah, there's been a lot of frustrations for sure with like the government not really communicating with us with a lot of things. Like even with the NDP, I was a little bit frustrated that they kind of backed the Emergencies Act, and they said they did so reluctantly, but I don't know, they didn't really, I feel like they didn't really explain very well, they didn't really communicate very well the reasons why they felt that this was absolutely necessary and why they're supporting it even though they are reluctant.
Playing both sides in a way, would you suspect?
Yeah, like saying the thing but then not really doing the thing, so that was a little bit frustrating because I was really supporting them, and I would really kind of, a little bit more communication on what the intention behind that would be nice. And just in general with the entire pandemic, like not really communicating when they realized that they made a mistake or that they got new information there, and maybe saying we were wrong. Or with, I think a good example is at the very beginning of the pandemic with the masks, they were telling people not to wear masks. And the reasoning was because they needed more masks for doctors because they didn't prepare, they didn't have enough for everybody. And it would have also been helpful to communicate that they recognized that that was a failure on their part, and to do something to make sure that that doesn't happen again, that there's plenty of protective equipment for everybody, that we don't run out for the doctors and nurses that need it the most. And then because of that miscommunication at the beginning where they didn't communicate properly and they just were like, oh, well, you don't really need masks. Actually, now you do need masks, but it was really just because the doctors needed the masks more. Now people kept pointing to that there's all this distrust because they feel like they were lied to.
So would you say they're more of a reactionary government or governing body? Because at least here in BC, I would have to agree with you. The NDP doesn't really act, they just react. Like our government is now doubling down on mask mandates, and Dr. Bonnie Henry doesn't want anything to do with the Freedom Convoy, and still says she's basing her studies on science, and yet most of the Western world is releasing the restrictions. So it's like they're reacting, but it's not based on science, and yet they claim they are. I strongly believe the NDP's just gone too far, and they haven't made any positive steps to actually changing our healthcare. So they can't release the mandates. They can't release any of this stuff because they're not sure that they've even done enough. And maybe they know they haven't done enough, but one could argue.
Yeah. And then because of that inaction, the externalized cost is put onto the people instead of them actually taking the actions necessary.
I just want to get these ideas down because I want other people to respond and talk about them.
Yeah.
I can't stand that for so long. It's like, you don't have a voice. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to think. Fuck you. How about we all just decide for ourselves? Awesome.
Yeah, and if we can get these ideas out there to everyone at home, then in the comments, what if someone has an even better idea or an idea that adds on to our idea? And then we actually can really flesh these things out. And and then if there's another protest, you can actually have an idea that resonates with people because people contributed to it, actually had a dialogue to figure out what was best for everyone. I feel like that is sorely missed. Like when governments make laws, there just doesn't seem to be a real survey process.
Well, the problem is they bundle laws like a crappy cable package. They'll be like 200 pages. It's like, by the way, you have 8 hours to like read through this and vote on it. And by the way, we're gonna put copyright law and internet censorship in with protecting children. What, you don't support protecting children? Oh my goodness. Yes, of course I do. And then they're gonna just pass sweeping laws that absolutely censor us and destroy our rights. Wait a second. So the very fact that they bundle laws on bills, like Bill C-10, I believe, is an absolute terrible example. We need less bundles.
Yeah.
We need reform in how our legislation is even brought.
Yeah, one bill at a time.
But
Like one law at a time.
If the populace don't demand this, they're just going to keep on going. So get the money out of politics. I mean, everyone's been saying that, but actually do it.
Yeah.
But there has to be a will, and the only way we can do that is come together as a people. So we got to get rid of all of our class divisions, all of our racial, gender, every division needs to be dealt with. And then we need to demand these motherfuckers that have been manipulating us for years to actually do their jobs. But we can only do that if enough of us demand it, because if 1 or 2 or even 100 protesters demand it, no one's going to care. But we all have to come together, and they're terrified of us coming together. And the internet is one way we can actually do that until they shut it off, like China. So don't take your internet for granted either. So pay attention to every single internet bill introduced by these motherfuckers in power, because they're slowly over time trying to erode every single aspect of the freedom of the internet. It will become like China. They will censor everything they can because they do not want you to think for yourself. You do what you're told, and we'll think for you. We'll write the laws for you. You do your job, and everything will be fine. Yeah. When's the last time that's worked? Look how our pandemic turned out.
So one of the other major things I wanted to talk to you guys about today is our COVID experience, because it is now almost year 3 into this whole process.
Yeah, similarly close to the first pandemic in 1918, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year-long pandemic.
I've never felt like I had so much in common with people 100 years ago, but here we are. And it was really tough because, you know, when the news first came out, you want to support your country, you want to back up vulnerable people. Like, every reason they gave was a reason, like, of course, I agree with that.
Yeah.
You know, it was never like submit, obey, like do as I say. It was like, no, it's in the efforts of compassion, in the efforts of like helping people. And
there was a sense of unity that hasn't been felt in a long time.
Yeah. So I feel like right at the very beginning, maybe for the first week, there was unity. You know, and then the mask thing, I think, was the first step, like nail in the coffin, where on many different steps, one thing was said and then another thing happened, and that breaks people's trust. And
well, it was the first time a new compulsory idea or thing had been introduced to society, and the last time was 100 years ago. Well, one could argue that seatbelts being compulsory was new.
And people protested that too.
Absolutely. It took, 10, 15 years for people just to adopt seatbelts and laws to be just the norm.
And even still, my dad still refuses to wear seatbelts. There's still a lot of people from the older generation that still hold on to that, like, nah, this is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't need to do this. I'm a good driver, so I don't need to do this. Like mentalities like that, or I've gone this many years of safe driving without any issues, so therefore it must be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that so many people suffered, there were so many businesses, middle-class businesses that went under, and there was people getting served, but not everybody, and I think that created another division.
I certainly didn't get served. I got laid off from my job and cut off, and I didn't qualify, so I had to decimate my own savings just to stay afloat.
Or people who already were struggling before the pandemic, like people who were already out of a job before the pandemic.
That's what I'm saying. I was about 3 months too little too late to qualify. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
But I think this CERB thing, especially with your latest stint with the CRA, it's exposed the consequences of taking government money. Because even when I took when I was a 4th-year apprentice, and when you're an apprentice and have an apprenticeship in Canada, you're actually able to apply for basically a training, like a school training EI. But even then, they'll look at your finances, they'll look at how much you made before, prior, this, that, and the other. And they determined that at me, as a 4th year, I made too much money, I no longer qualify. And yet I was living paycheck to paycheck. So I went to school with no EI, with no support. I literally had like $20 to my name. I was lucky to stay with some family friends. I was literally roughing it. And I just squeaked by. And then it was due to a clerical error that they excluded me. So they back paid all the EI that they owed me and taxed me on it the following year while I was already working, which increased my wages into the next tax bracket. So they just screwed me twice. I needed the money. They didn't give it to me. They gave me the money when I didn't need it. And they taxed me on it. And I couldn't refuse it because it was government back pay. Unbelievable. So even there is a consequence taking government money. And a lot of people on the right are gonna be like, "See, I told you," but a lot of people do need that money. They need that support cushion.
Yeah.
But the way it's being run is ridiculous. So people that just take government money, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. You may have a justified reason for taking that money, but the government does not care. They don't want to give you that money. It's actually their job to make sure you don't get that money. And they actually have auditors and people that will make threatening phone calls to you and treat you like a second-class citizen to convince you that no, you don't need that money, even though you rightfully deserve it. So all I could really say on that is the government is completely complicit on their handling of the money. And if they don't want these people to have the money, then nobody should be paying into employment insurance. If it's there for legitimate reasons, it should be available, no question.
Yeah.
Yeah, like nobody told me that I was gonna probably have to pay back the first month. Like the explanation that they gave me afterwards was so confusing. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around the explanation. I had to get them to repeat it to me at least twice, and I still can barely understand the explanation they gave me. They gave me an extra payment right away so that I could get the money immediately, so therefore it was an overpayment, so now I have to pay back $2,000 just because I was laid off through no fault of my own because of a pandemic, and I required that money to not be homeless. And which is the case for probably anybody that was on CERB. Most people don't have enough savings to be able to keep paying their rent when they lose their job.
There was certainly a lot of fraud with CERB though. And we can touch on that, but yeah.
But yeah, I'll get to that. And then on top of that $2,000 that they want me to pay back for that overpayment that there apparently was the first month or whatever, on top of that, I still have to pay my regular taxes. So now I owe over $3,000, and I'm like, Jesus, what the hell? Most people don't have that much money saved. Just be able to throw away. So to tax people that are struggling that much, it really feels like an argument for universal basic income. Just because people lost their job or are disabled or are sick or anything like that, they shouldn't be financially punished for that kind of stuff and forced to jump through all of these hoops, and then at the end of it, then they still demand some of the money back even after you prove and jump through every single hoop and do everything that you're supposed to do and try to follow all of the steps and try and do everything right and try and do everything that they want you to do. And then at the end of it, they still turn around and... So
they're capitalizing on basically your confusion and trying to claw back a certain percentage of monies that they've paid out.
Yeah.
And they're using all these little nitpicky excuses and methods and ways to get back a certain percentage, because I think at the end of the day, they can't afford to give out a lot of these payments because have you noticed inflation lately? Our country is not really financially or economically viable. Gasoline went up to $1.95 today. I don't know if you checked. But
I did not know.
So I checked this morning. It shot up to $1.95. At Costco, it's still $1.73. But I mean, we're approaching $2 a liter. Who on earth can afford that? We're going to get to a point where people literally won't be able to afford to go to work, and then what? Yeah. So the government needs to do something about this. So where is the inflation coming from, though?
Yeah.
Well, it's from government printed money. Unfortunately, CERB payments were made with government printed money. And a lot of people on the center to the center right are going to argue that, well, this is what happens when you just give out free money. Well, okay, let's look at that. Where should the money come from? Oh, I don't know, maybe the corporations such as Amazon, Google, Apple, who pay no tax through loopholes and shell companies, and they're still allowed to operate in Canada. So it's a lack of willingness from the government to enforce their own tax laws on these big players. They could simply just deny Amazon access to Canada. Well, you damn right still pay taxes if you deny 30 million customers. but the government doesn't have the gumption to even make a move like that. So you need a government that's willing to enforce its own tax laws for everyone, including corporations. And maybe some of that revenue could be redistributed to social programs in a type of universal basic income, or those that really do need it. And then we wouldn't need to waste all this time nitpicking who gets what and this, that, and the other, and all these government oversight jobs to make sure that that person over there who's barely making any payments and is barely getting by, do they deserve it? Well,
yeah, exactly.
How about Google, Apple, Amazon, just to name a few? Do they deserve it?
Yeah, let's make this disabled person jump through a million hoops every couple years or whatever to prove that they're still disabled and all of these things, when it's like, when we could just give everybody enough money to survive. And I think that also kind of ties back into the oil nationalization thing that we were talking about earlier. Like how you said there would be a surplus of money from that. That would be another thing that where that money could come from.
Exactly. Social programs could.
So that we could literally benefit everybody.
University education could be funded by our own energy that we sell to the world.
Wow. Yeah.
Collectively.
Go figure.
So you need to get rid of private interests, corporatism. There's so many things that need to be undone. You know, Canada has almost turned into Diet USA. We're like USA Light. We can be our own country. We can decide what we want to do and stop being influenced by unlimited capitalism. One could argue that unlimited, unregulated capitalism is bad. A true free market system could be good, but the fact that corporatism, and the pandemic proved this, you know, mom and pop shops that have been around for 10, 20 years, well, they're getting decimated and they're locked down and they're not allowed to operate, but McDonald's is allowed to operate. Please pull up to the second window. Oh, the gyms are closed, but don't worry, pull up to the second window. It's ridiculous, the priorities, and it's by design. The biggest players with the biggest amount of money are allowed to operate and nobody else is. And the government will always go after people that cannot defend themselves. And that needs to change, and the only way that changes is through the masses agreeing that, hey, this needs change.
Yeah, and like endless tax breaks and bailouts and all kinds of assistance from the government for massive corporations, but not really as much of that for the smaller businesses. Like, especially the small businesses that have been struggling through this pandemic that were forced to be shut down, but then there's tons of government assistance and handouts and things that go to like big corporations. They get like all these loopholes and tax breaks and all of these things that if that went to small businesses instead, then we could prop up small businesses that have been struggling throughout the pandemic and like, limit the amount of people and things like that in bigger corporations just as much as the smaller places. Like I noticed the same thing when we went Christmas shopping. It was extremely obvious because way more people are going shopping around that time. The mall was absolutely packed. I couldn't believe how many people were in the mall. I felt like it was almost a mistake to go there. And then literally across the street we go to this tiny little crystal shop and no more than 2 people are allowed in the store, and we had to like wait outside and like literally line up outside.
There was certainly hypocrisies with how the restrictions were even enforced, and major corporations were almost exempt, or they came up with their own little plans that they could bankroll themselves, but other places couldn't. You know, how can one restaurant compete against 100 McDonald's restaurants? Well, you can't. So it's purely a numbers game. So at the end of the day, the only way this changes is if enough of us demand change, and we have to stop being so divided, and more people need this awareness. And one could argue that the Freedom Convoy at least brought this awareness. It's been politicized and misconstrued in so many different ways that people still aren't fully banding together. Like, I'll say I'm triple vaxxed. I didn't want to be triple vaxxed. I got double vaxxed because I didn't want the inconvenience of not being able to do things. And to some degree, initially I believed the science, but it seems pretty reactionary still. It is an experimental vaccine, so I can see people's concerns. But overall, it has been relatively safe. I'm not terrified of the vaccine. However, people should be allowed to make those choices themselves. And the moment it becomes compulsory, well, then you've got a problem. We're no longer Canada. So the fact that they went after the truckers specifically stopped making sense, because most of these truckers, they spend 22, 23 hours inside of their trucks. They were allowed to be inside their trucks, and throughout the entire pandemic as essential workers, they crossed the borders without problem, and they actually found that there was no additional cases being brought by the truckers themselves. So why all of a sudden the change of heart? It just causes this rift in reality, and you can't really believe that our government was backed by the science when it's right there. There was nothing scientific about making vaccines compulsory amongst truckers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I can understand like long-term care facilities and healthcare, but even then they should still be allowed to make that choice. But the vulnerable, yeah, that makes sense.
Like,
but
literally
I mean,
working with the
a
most
truck driving across the border, and they're in their truck.
They're not even interacting.
What does it matter?
And along with the mandates, I think the universal basic income would have really helped with that as well, because then it would really help anybody actually have more of a choice, that if they didn't want to take the vaccine, then they could be paid to stay home, have all of their financial basic needs met, not have to worry about the roof over their head and food and etc.
Well,
and then when we've got the pandemic more under control, then be able to come back to work again when the mandates are all lifted. Like, they would have been, I think, a lot less hard on people and a lot easier for people to make this decision if there was that option of, if you don't want to take the vaccine, then you can stay home and you don't have to worry about money, basically.
I think a universal income right now, though, wouldn't help because inflation is out of control. Right. In 2015, the average house in Canada was $480,000, and even that's pretty high. We're looking at $860,000 for the average home in Canada now. That's almost double. So no amount of like you would literally have to give out $4,000 a month in free money. And it's got to come from somewhere. And if the government isn't going to enforce their own tax laws and tax all these corporations and actually redistribute the wealth properly, if they just keep printing money, well, guess what happens? More inflation. And every conservative is going to back this up. And it's true. If you print money, you'll have more money buying fewer goods, and then the prices just keep going up until you have a Germany situation where it's 20 million Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread. So at some point you have to stop the inflation, and you have to go after the wealth of some of these corporations that have just been bleeding everyone dry. So I agree that a UBI would certainly help, but you can't just magically pull a UBI out of thin air. It has to come from the money that is already in circulation. And unless you find a governing body that is willing to actually do that, a UBI will not only not work, it'll bankrupt everyone in this country. So I think a lot of people have anxieties when they mention UBI, oh, it's communism, oh, it's going to collapse the economy. It absolutely will, unless that money comes from the proper channels, such as these goddamn corporations that have been sucking us dry.
So yeah, I agree that in as well as the UBI, that they absolutely should be going after the mega corporations, all of the online mega giants that don't pay tax in Canada, even though they profit off of Canadians. Yep. And as well, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Every company or every country is complicit in this. It has to, on a global scale, every Western developed country needs to enforce their own tax laws and stop letting these corporations have more GDP power than them. We have literal Google who has more power than entire countries. That needs to change. No company should have more power than any state on earth. That's insane.
There's lots of corporations, like mega corporations, that have profited billions off of the pandemic as well, and like raising prices and all that stuff. So tax the shit out of that as well. That's another really big one. Yeah, they should, like, why are they making money off of the life-saving vaccine that that we need to get through this pandemic?
Well, Pfizer wasn't going to do it for free. They shouldn't be making profits off of that. That should be going back to, like, like everyone should be getting this for free. Well, the vaccine didn't cost you anything.
Fair enough, but like, I guess that is more in reference. Yeah, that aspect, and the fact that in other countries people have had a harder time getting access to it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I guess the aspect of everybody should be able to get it for free, that goes for like the entire world, and that hasn't really been the case worldwide of everybody just being able to go and get it for free, just like that. And even in Canada, we had to wait. We weren't able to get it right away. It took months longer for us to get it than everybody else, because like Steo and I, we were the lowest on the priority list as far as people when they were prioritizing who in Canada gets the vaccine.
in terms of age demographic?
Yeah, in terms of age demographic and work, because we don't interact with people for our job doing janitorial. So yeah, between the age and the job and things like that, we had to wait the longest to get the vaccine until it was available to absolutely everybody, basically. Yeah, so that's what I meant. Not country.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, and then in other parts of the world, people have an even harder time than us getting access to the vaccine.
I could attest to that. I have a friend in Colombia who actually couldn't get him, didn't have access to Pfizer or Moderna, and actually had to stand in line for days to just get an experimental vaccine. And people are complaining about Pfizer or Moderna, mRNA. I mean, I don't doubt it's an experimental vaccine, but the fact that we have access and you have a choice to get it or not, you're kind of spoiled that you have that choice, and you can make that choice for yourself. But again, reinforcing the Freedom Convoy stance, it should always be a choice, and that's how we got here.
Yeah, and it's past trial phases, so it's not like a completely full-blown experimental vaccine that we have no idea what's going to happen. It's
we don't know long term.
But it has passed like the trial phases, like it has been approved and things like that. So it's
certainly, but there are no known long-term effects yet. It'll take literal decades to see if editing or inserting mRNA into your body does anything, and more studies will come out, and we'll see. And it was essentially a gamble. Ergo, it should always be a choice.
Yeah, because some people are against that gamble.
And some people actually just medically can't take any intravenous drug. Like there are so many different types of conditions where even the allergy to propylene glycol, there's certain chemicals that these vaccines are made up of that people are just allergic to.
Yeah, it's possible for people to be allergic to anything. I mean, you can be allergic to all kinds of food. Doesn't mean that it's like that the food's bad, but you probably shouldn't have that food. Yeah. So yeah, there should be a plan in place for people that literally can't take the vaccine. That is absolutely fair.
When you have legitimate concerns about a vaccine, but then they're labeled as unacceptable views or propaganda, or you're silenced or whichever, it just gives people cause to feel that outrage, that disconnect, and want to rise up and band together. And again, this is why I think a lot of people got behind this so-called Freedom Convoy. It wasn't really just about the truckers, it was just about making choices. It's the first time our choices were challenged, and as a country we you can either come together on that, or you can stay divided, or you can just not participate. And the government is banking on you not participating, so more of us need to participate, otherwise we will get even worse for tyranny. Could you imagine? I can't, and I don't want to.
So this brings us to the final subject, which was the Freedom Convoy. So these guys standing up for people's rights and the freedom of choice and just the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in general was really encouraging to see. I think it was definitely the honking, because I'm personally sensitive to sound. I know you are.
Oh, as am I. I have my own misophonic issues.
If that was going on in my city, I probably would have lost at day 3. Like that's how quick I would probably be like, shut up.
Yeah. Like in a real world. Mental break.
Yeah, mental break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Start doing horrible things and
not being able to sleep. I have a really hard time when people interrupt my sleep and I can't sleep from external forces.
Yeah.
That it's like, if you would literally just stop that, I could sleep. That drives me crazy.
I think it was so effective though at getting people's attention though. So that's the part where it's like that double-edged sword of like, so is there a middle ground where we do it for a day or two?
But yeah, it's not like they were torturing the politicians. They were just torturing the local residents. They didn't make the rules. They're just...
Imagine how painful it would be. You build up a business, you work your ass off for 10, 20 years, you work hard, you put in effort every day, and it's still not good enough, and because of government policy, you are decimated and others are not. Like, that would be devastating. So, and a lot of people gravitate and feel that, but I think the other point on that is we can't diminish one person's pain against another. We got to stop comparing each other's pain. Like, oh, okay, well, the people in the apartment blocks, they suffered. Yeah, they suffered. That needs to be addressed. These people lost their businesses. Yeah, they lost their businesses. That needs to be addressed. We have to stop putting people against each other, and they want to do that. They want to create all this divide, so we can't actually fight the real people that are instigating all this, and that is our government.
Yeah, and I guess one of the big questions I have for the convoy is like that problem that you mentioned of like that businesses, small businesses struggling and not being able to compete with all of these larger corporations. Yeah.
Well, I think we're doing a good job at least saying that our hand in it is our inaction.
Yeah. It's kind of all of our fault here.
Yeah.
And the second we start realizing that, the quicker we can come together, hopefully, unless you fall for the usual tripe of, race and religion and gender and all these other dividing factors and French. They don't speak the French. We don't fucking care. Like, that's got to end too. Like, we're all Canadians.
You got it back?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, that long-standing problem of like small businesses struggling, and no matter what you do, you just can't compete with the larger mega corporations and things like that. That has been an ongoing problem for long before this pandemic, and just ending the mandates alone isn't going to fix the root of that problem. That is still going to keep being an ongoing issue, even if we end the mandates. So I guess that's one of the questions that I would have for the convoy, is what is the ongoing plan beyond ending the mandates for actually fixing these issues, for fixing things, for helping small businesses that are struggling, for helping poverty, the housing market that is just absurdly expensive, homelessness, people struggling to find work. All of these things have been issues long before the pandemic. Our healthcare system, we have had an overwhelmed healthcare system, and
people dying literally in waiting rooms.
Yeah.
In Manitoba, they waited 9 hours and they just died. Yep.
The pandemic just really exposed all of these issues and brought it kind of more to the surface that it's way harder to ignore, and now everybody's really feeling it a lot more than ever before. So now you can't really ignore these issues anymore. But just ending the mandates alone, that's not going to fix the root of these issues. So if there's a plan for actually addressing all of those other issues beyond just end the mandates and then we all go home and we're done, then maybe I could get on board with this. I need to know is there a plan for that, or is it literally just end the mandates and then we're done, back to business as usual, back to everybody still suffering from all these things, just now it's not because of the mandate, it's because of some other reason.
Yeah, well, if it goes back to business as usual and nothing changes, then that's the worst case scenario, pretty much.
That's the part I have a hard time with.
Yeah, but no government is going to give you a plan that's actually tangible. You have to demand the plan. You need to make demands, a short list of this is what needs to happen, or I'm not fucking voting for you. And more people need to do this. There's not enough pressure and not enough unity to make all these political parties, like there is not a single political party in Canada right now that could address the housing issue. They'll all say, the Liberals will say, we just do the $10 a day child credit and we're gonna put more money in Canadians' pockets. That line has been said over and over and over, and that doesn't change the fact that it's literal millions of dollars just for an average middle class home. The only way this gets fixed is we make demands, and whoever's running, they better toe the line, because if they don't, they're not getting voted in, and people need to be willing to vote against their party, vote across party lines, or vote for maybe somebody who closer represents what those plans may be. And you stop going with this far left, far right, or it's red versus blue, or whatever party lines. I mean, the U.S. is a horrible example of that. They are so polarized, and Canada, quite frankly, is becoming polarized. So we need new parties, we need new leadership, and the only way we move forward is collectively we make realistic demands that actually start addressing the real issues, and we stop letting these politicians brainwash everybody into thinking they got their back at the behest of others.
Yeah, more communication on every level, like you were saying.
Transparency.
Yeah.
Like you said, putting the question to the people, to the convoy. What is our plan? Let's put all our minds together. We're smart. Collectively, we can put it all together.
We're
and
all
figure
adults
this out.
here. Klondike adjacent article released in May this year. So first off, this article is about members of a controversial secretive religious sect funding a third-party group behind anti-Trudeau ads. That cult is none other than Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, who came up in recent news in the Klondike Papers. And this article ties them to Scott Moe's Saskatchewan Party and Jason Kenney's United Conservative Party. The article points at 13 donors across Canada linked to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, who donated a total of $37,000 to the Canada Growth Council within a span of 48 hours. The Canada Growth Council is the entity that ran a massive ad campaign against Justin Trudeau and anyone that doesn't agree with oil bro policies. Again, it ties the Canada Growth Council to individuals listed as directors of Brethren churches, schools, and charities. A feller by the name of Keith Prince, who was the president of Tilsonburg Tube, is listed as being the single biggest donation at $7,500. He's also the director of a registered charity that operates a Brethren meeting hall in Tilsonburg, Ontario. And then Phil Jenner, co-founder of Klondike Lubricants, where also the name Klondike Papers comes from, is listed as donating $3,000 to the Canada Growth Council. Jenner is listed as a director on the board of the Brethren School in Surrey, BC. Now, the conspiracy of the plot to kill Justin Trudeau aside, you can see the clear links between the Plymouth Brethren Church and the Conservative Party of Canada and the Conservative premiers in Canada. It is a web of money going back and forth, connecting them all together.
We'll clarify with the convoy. The convoy itself was meant to cause confusion. And during confusion, things happen. There are unstable people with weapons. When I say that there was a plot, not a direct plot in the sense that we're going to have a professional go and clip this guy. They were not bringing in their own mechanics. In a convoy like this, when it's at a fever pitch and emotions get high, alcohol's involved, rhetoric, what these guys were counting on was an incident of violence that was spearheaded by one of these convoy attendees. This is the only way they can win. They can't win a general election. It's not possible if you look at the numbers. Pierre may be the most popular conservative on the planet, but they still can't pull the numbers to wrest control of the country. However, if there's a violent confrontation, they can use the response of the government and spin it their own way to create a public outcry for an inquiry or a public outcry for an election. This is how it's done. This is how you topple a government.
Obviously, we've taken significant measures to keep Canadians safe, particularly given the threat of these new variants that are being developed elsewhere around the world.
And this was so organic and so sort of how it wasn't the Teamsters, it wasn't one organization. They said we didn't realize how big this was going to be. So they listened, they were respectful, Tamara in particular. And that night I remember getting to a steakhouse about 10 o'clock on the Friday night with the chief of staff to the mayor of Ottawa and saying, we're good. They want a peaceful resolution. All they really want is to get out of the residences so Mayor Watson will then talk to them. Remember, not a single politician had even listened to them. And that's a Canadian trait, to listen. That wasn't happening. And Mayor Watson made it clear, if you don't move out of the residences, I'm not speaking to you.
Comes to light that there is an agreement on the Sunday, and we know there's a cabinet meeting that follows, and that's what I kind of prefaced the interview with, right? So when Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor, is telling the government there is the potential for a breakthrough, is it your assessment that that potential she's talking about is the negotiations that you were going, like this is the breakthrough? Did you feel there's a breakthrough? And how do you define breakthrough?
So I define the breakthrough, and I think the word should have been there is an agreement.
Pat King, another organizer, immediately denounced that agreement and said, stand your ground, in a video, I think that was posted on social media. Tamara Leach at the time then said there isn't agreement, the media is lying, and then later, did say that there is one, right? Yeah, walked it back. So there is some confusion there.
Kudos to the law enforcement and to the truckers that day for getting dozens out. We need to get the official account, that's going to come out in the inquiry. But this is my point. Why wouldn't Trudeau's cabinet have waited on the Sunday night to say, Mayor Watson, a very credible, respected mayor, has an agreement. Let's just wait 2 or 3 days to see if this peaceful resolution works. If it doesn't, if it's not real, then let's put down the hammer. But this is a black mark on Canadian history. History will show this was a total overreaction, in my opinion, and the inquiry is going to show that as well. But by the way, you make a really good point. I want to make it clear, there was different factions. The person that you met with, I would never have met with that individual. I would not have met with that individual. That would not have been a starter.
You mean Pat King?
Yes. Absolutely. And I made it very clear to the group, anybody that wants to try to overthrow a duly elected government, you got the wrong mediator in the room. I got a plane that's waiting for me on the tarmac. I'm flying back to Toronto. Done. I had actually come up the week before just to observe. I jumped in a few big rigs. I talked to a few truckers and I listened. Here's what I found out that hasn't been reported. Most of those truckers were owner-operator business owners. Think about it, like that's a $300,000 to a $400,000 asset. Who's going to let you take that sort of television equipment and park it for 2 weeks? They had a story that needed to be heard. One of the stories, because they travel all over, was the breaking of the Constitution of the government as far as interprovincial mobility, the mobility rights of this country. Like, we have lawmakers here in Ottawa. If you don't like the mobility rights in the Constitution, walk into the legislature or the House of Commons and change the law. Don't break your own laws. These were the things I was hearing from the truckers. So did we cross the line or not? And Canadians need to know that. Now, you can't say the ends justify the means. Every decision, as former chief of staff, every decision has to start and end with the rule of law. And so what I was hearing from the truckers was that on multiple occasions, they felt their own government had breached the Constitution of Canada.
The idea that, the Prime Minister should have met with people, or, that would also set a pretty extreme precedent, right? If you want to get the Prime Minister to sit down with you, you occupy the capital city of a country. I think a lot of Canadians would have trouble with that too.
I think there's a respectful way on both sides to act. A Canadian trait, though, is to listen. Look, X amount of money is coming from out of country. Later, the media did a great job of clarifying. 88% came from Canadians, not from overseas. So we had a cabinet minister saying that. We had another cabinet minister that was saying the police are asking for us to invoke the War Measures Act. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, multiple times. That has to be held to account.
And it is. I mean, it's coming through committee.
It is.
It's coming through. And at the same time, we hear from the police after, they wouldn't have been able to do their jobs without the invocation of that act. I think there's conversation around that too, but they have said that post.
Really, because I think the police had the tools to do their job, and that's why they didn't ask for such a drastic measure.
I get it, but they didn't use them.
Yeah, but that's not up to us to direct them. So for whatever reasons that happened, people have to look into that. Valid question, valid point.
Do you, just really quick final point, I've gone on way too long. Is the inquiry, you think, the right mechanism for this? Do you believe that the questions you have and others have will be answered through that?
No. The Supreme Court of Canada, if you get a chance to interview former Premier Peckford and you talk about the reference that's available to all governments, both provincial and federal, to get a reference from the Supreme Court on everything that happened during the pandemic. Let's clear the air. Let's bring the temperature down. Did the federal and provincial governments break the Constitution? It's available in the Constitution. It's a story that's not being told.
For years, St. Bridget's Catholic Church has stood peacefully, a stone's throw from Parliament Hill in Ottawa's Lower Town district. That peace, it appears, has been disturbed.
It doesn't matter if they pay today or not, they're out. They gotta go.
Not long after a bailiff issued an eviction notice to the tenants, Dina Sharif showed up to make a point about hypocrisy.
Freedom for me, but not freedom for thee?
You see, the current occupants are members of a group that call themselves the United People of Canada, or TUPOC, with a stated yet somewhat vague goal of building community.
We are called to bring healing to the nation.
The mayor of Ottawa, the city councillor of this area, the head of the community association for this area, and the residents keep telling you they don't want you here. Why are you trying to force yourselves on a community that doesn't want you here? We didn't ask you to come here. We didn't ask for your help. Everybody's asking you to leave. They've evicted you from the building, and you are trying to force yourselves on people that don't want you here. So explain to me why you are doing that.
Hey, Daisy.
You know what? I don't have an answer for that situation that you have, because I'm not answering to all the people. You're the one who's saying it, so I'm going to address you. I'm sorry you feel that way about this place. However,
I listed the mayor, the Lower Town Community Association, the city councilor's office. I'm not speaking for them. They have spoken.
They have spoken out verbally in a place of position against something that was...
They speak for this community.
The Freedom Convoy. So right away there's a judgment call. There's about human rights issue here. Like, we've got to get beyond this.
So you're not going to answer the question.
1,000 people who were underground. I was serving in the convoy. I was serving food. I meet my spiritual mother who's 85 years old on the street helping one another.
Well,
because we know the importance of this season. Where were you?
So
were you not out? I was trapped in my house.
I was trapped in my house because of the goddamn convoy. And for an organization that keeps saying that you're nothing to do with the convoy, you keep bringing up the convoy. Nobody's bringing it up but you. You're the one who keeps bringing up the convoy. You keep saying you're not part of the convoy, and you keep bringing up the convoy. No, I didn't mention the convoy once.
Not once.
Some of those apparently leading Tupac have links to the so-called Freedom Convoy that occupied parts of Ottawa earlier this year, although director Diane Nolan now dismisses that as an event and wants people to be less critical and judgmental. They see the church as a home base. Residents see it as a headache that's bound to get worse.
Once you establish the headquarters, and once you have once you have more trucks coming in, whatnot, how bad does it get? Does it become a staging area for future convoy occupations? We don't know.
So there's this whole pseudo law movement. It's been around for a very long time, and it has different bases. But basically, the premise of it is what we all agree are laws and are codified and enforced aren't real. And in fact, it's their alternative legal system that's real. And they think if they use certain language, that it's like magic.
So William Comer, the guy who is running the United People of Canada's church, he's currently in court attempting to argue that he should just be given the church, even though he doesn't pay rent. He's currently stuck in a restaurant following recess from the court today because he and his friends couldn't settle their lunch bill.
The Freedom Convoy has been seen in Peterborough attempting to arrest the entire police department. The Freedom Convoy is saying that the Peterborough police have violated the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and they want to do a citizen's arrest on the entire police department and turn them over to the Canadian military. In the crowd, you see people wearing shirts that say 1776 and Christ is King. Because, you know, America and Christianity, two fundamental things to Canadian freedom.
It's called participating in COVID crimes. You ever heard of it? Military's coming, guys. Just wait. Yeah. You had a year to take me out. You failed. Now we're gonna remove you. Hey, oh! They were bullying back. That was bullying. Hey! I suggest you stand down! Stand down!
The self-proclaimed Queen of Canada. She says the Queen of England has taken her rightful position as such, and she's actively trying to take back the Kingdom of Canada, usually with calls to violence.
So that's where we open up the conversation to you guys at home, on the internet, out there in the world. We're talking about this, but it's really to inspire the conversation, to transcend this moment here, and to get out there to you guys, and so you can ask the question to the convoy and to people that believe in this stuff and get their answers and get their thoughts on this.
Exactly. Stop politicizing every single thing. Find common ground, find commonality, find a way to move forward, because if none of us are willing to collectively move forward, then we're all going to stay divided and the ruling class will just keep us
subjugated.
Yeah. Keep us fighting.
Yeah.
We need to fight them, not each other.
So, thank you so much for watching and tuning in. And this is a dialogue. So, comment what you thought, if there was a moment that we could have gone further on, or if you have any further points, please add it to the comments below.
Yeah, maybe we can make like a part 2 where we like find all of the comments, or as many comments as we can, depending how many comments we get, and like respond to all of them or something.
Yeah, we would love to respond to you. Yeah. Like, you are just as a part of this as we are here in front of you. So thank you very much.
Our races united by a history long forgotten, and a future we shall face together.
This is outrageous. Where are the armed men who come in to take the protesters away? Where are they? This kind of behavior is never tolerated. You shout like that, they put you in jail right away.
A prime minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this house at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
We are free, you stupid fuck! The system's instability has been with it from the beginning. We average an economic downturn every 4 to 7 years in capitalism. For 300 years, no matter where capitalism has come to, that is what it brings with it. We live with a system that periodically throws millions of people out of work, undoes their family life, undermines their educations, is produce an inequality that is mind-bending. Of course, it's easy to see why, if the boards of directors and the major shareholders decide what to do with the profits and give a lot of it to themselves, bingo, we've explained inequality. But the problem is, it's the system that produces the inequality, Not this or that law, this or that rule, or this or that political candidate. This is a systemic problem, like our instability. The famous number this last year was that something on the order of 86 of the richest people in the world together have more wealth than the bottom half of the population of the planet. That's about 3.5 billion people. Folks, this is a level of inequality that takes us back to the pyramids. Capitalism's achievement is a level of inequality and instability that should have long ago made people question, what are we doing, staying in, living with, accepting, especially uncritically, a system that works like this?
Conservative leader has been purposefully using his videos to appeal to far-right misogynistic online movements. I call on the Conservative leader to stand in this House, take responsibility, and apologize.
I condemned this organization, and I corrected the problem as soon as it became known to me, Mr. Speaker. But I condemn all forms of misogyny, including when the Prime Minister fired the very first female Indigenous Attorney General. When he mistreated minority young women in his own caucus who had to leave politics, and I condemn him for when he dressed up in racist costumes so many times he forgot them all. We condemn it always, Mr. Speaker.
Documents were released yesterday that showed that the Edmonton Police Service had a plan to mass arrest counter-protesters during the February Freedom Convoy demonstrations. But, worth noting, while there were plans to mass arrest counter-protesters to the Freedom Convoy, there were no plans to arrest the protesters from the Freedom Convoy. Just the people protesting the protest. The protest was fine. The documents were released after a complaint from a local activist, Haroon Ali, who filed a complaint about the EPS's handling of the Freedom Convoy in February. Among the key complaints were the fact that the EPS didn't enforce a court injunction against the use of horns downtown, and just a general lack of management of the protest. Although it appears that many officers claimed that they didn't even know there was an injunction against the use of horns in the downtown area. But the complaint also focuses on how the EPS's handling of the counter-protesters was militaristic and heavy-handed. So the EPS alleged that the counter-protesters were planning to block downtown streets and a railway, and the EPS major event commander established an incident response plan. The plan started with talking and ended with a, quote, mass arrest protocol, where patrol branches would be directed to send police wagons and resources. Worth noting, in the same document there are absolutely no plans about the EPS's response to the Freedom Convoy, or of any plan to mass arrest them. And there's also an odd focus on City Councillor Michael Jans in these documents, because of this photo, where Jans dropped off some Rice Krispie squares at a counter-protest. The EPS described this as, quote, in the 35 minutes it took for this event, media was on scene and a city councilor arrived and brought snacks to the group, indicating a pre-planned and orchestrated event. And another officer said, quote, one councillor actually participated in a counter-protest by handing out refreshments. It was felt that political messaging may inspire further counter-protest activity and create further policing challenges or fuel more protesters to join the cause or change venues in response to the media messaging. It is a box of Rice Krispie squares. He was out on his bike with his 5-year-old, and he appears to have just happened to have an already open box of Rice Krispie squares. Maybe a bit of a reach. And the documents also included a whole bunch of the police high-fiving themselves on how great a job they did during the Freedom Convoy, and how they wouldn't change a thing. Now, Haroon Ali, the person who initially submitted this complaint, has until September 30th to provide a response to the Edmonton Police Commission, and they'll have a ruling on the complaint in the middle of October. To the shock of no one, Edmonton Police Service did not respond to media inquiries. So to recap, convoy protest, go ahead, do your thing. Convoy counter-protest, you're under arrest. Makes perfect sense.
That's over with. Now I can get back to my normal boring news cycle and see what I missed. Russia's invading Ukraine. You fucking what?